Hello, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of Redgate's Community Circle. This week, in the Introduction to Reporting Services class, we will be talking about some of the more advanced interactive report features. There's really no one word to describe the features that we're going to talk about today. And some of them have been touched on throughout the other weeks of the course. So what I'm going to do is talk about some of the ones that I didn't talk about. I'll include a few of those in here just to make this session more complete. But for the most part, these will be new things that you haven't seen before in the previous weeks. Again, we've got some resources. We've got the live class through Zoom, like you're watching today. You can watch all of the videos by going to YouTube and looking for Redgate's Community Circle playlist, or you can find them on Redgate University on the Redgate site. You can find the slides from today, as well as the homework and the solution to the homework out on my GitHub account. So feel free to go out there and download materials. There is a forum set up just for the class, so you can ask questions there. I've gotten a couple of questions there so far as of today's recording, so I'd love to see some more discussion out on that forum. And also, there is an article that touches on some of the things we're going to talk about today. There's actually probably some overlap with some of the other things we discussed. And this particular article is a couple of years old, so it might not be quite up to date, but I don't believe there have been a lot of changes in this material. So be sure to check that out. Really no new housekeeping items. Just to remind you, because this happens to me just about every time I start a new project, I forget to go in and fix that credentials page. If you don't do that after creating a data source, then your data source will not work. When you go to create the data set based on it, it will cause an error. And make sure you don't disable SSRS. If you've been following along these past few weeks, you probably have come up against this error. If not, make sure that you do not disable Visual Studio unless you are done working with SSRS. So there are quite a few interactive or more, I'm going to say, advanced features. And this is the last slide today, because what I'm going to do is just jump into the demo and just show them one by one. I thought about having a slide explaining each one, but I thought that's just going to take time. There's a lot to demo today. And in the homework, it asks you to replicate each one of these features. So that could be a really good reference for you as well in the future as you write your own reports. So I'm going to switch to the demo. And I have a solution already set up with my shared data source pointing at AdventureWorks. And I've got a couple of reports already set up that I'm going to use. So I'll show you what that looks like first. I have this product sales base report that'll come up, and I've got a couple of data sets. I think I'm just going to start with just the product sales data set, and I've got the report already somewhat laid out. And the first thing I want to talk about is the expressions. Now, expressions in reporting services are pretty easy to set up. They let you do all kinds of things and control all kinds of properties, but you need to know when you can use an expression. So what you should look for, so for example, if I go right click and just go to Textbox Properties and take a look at that, there are a lot of places that I see a little FX symbol, meaning function or functionality, I guess. And for example, the name is Textbox 4. You cannot change that with an expression. You cannot change that. Here's some sizing options. You can allow the height to increase or decrease as needed. And by default, it allows it to increase. You cannot change that with an expression. However, you can change the value, the text that's displayed. I could even add a tooltip, and that's not something that I thought about earlier. But let me just go ahead and demonstrate how I would do that. Let me click FX, and I start out with the little equal sign, just like an Excel formula, if you're used to working with Excel. And I can add something in quotes. Let's say this report is called, and an ampersand. I believe you could also use a plus. And I've got a lot of things that I can choose from down in this bottom panel. So for example, the built-in fields, and those will match what you see over in the report data built-in fields. And in this case, I want to choose the report name and click OK. So now under tooltip, I could have just hard-coded something in, just type something in there. But in this case, because it is an expression, you just see that little EXPR that designates if I'm going to change this, I need to go in and click this FX to bring up the expression box. Notice under value, I've got a placeholder. Okay, we've seen placeholders before. There are other things that I might change. For example, I can change whether I want something to be bolded or whether I want something to be italicized, the colors, what are the effects? Underlining, custom line spacing, all kinds of different things. So as I click around, I can see there are lots of places that I can use an expression instead of a hard-coded value. I'm going to click OK here. The other thing I can do, well, for example, if I just right-click on any of the text boxes, and probably some of the other properties, text boxes for sure, I can always go straight to expression. So this is the value that is going to be displayed. Okay, to get to the other types of properties, I either have to bring up that property box, or I can look at the properties over here in this property box. So like, for example, if I would want the font color to change, I can click the drop down, and down at the bottom, it doesn't say FX, it says expression. So sometimes you'll see the word expression in some of these properties. So if I go here, let's see, can shrink, can grow, can only change that just with hard-coded values, just like I showed you when I brought up the text box property box. Can you change the location? Nope, can't change the location. So most of the properties you can change with an expression or programmatically. There are some that cannot. And a lot of that probably just has to do with the integrity of the report, the layout. Because if you remember from week 1, I call this pixel perfect. So there's only so much you can do to keep the report from kind of exploding, I guess. So I'm going to go ahead and run this one. And once it comes up, hopefully it won't take too long, I just wanted to show you that tooltip and also that it picked up the report name. Now, previous weeks, I've been adding the execution time and the page number. So you've seen that before. But this is the first time I've pulled the report name from the property. And also, if I mouse over, there's that tooltip. And that's something that I have to admit I forgot about when I was putting the class together. So I'm definitely going to add that to the homework, because I think that is a very cool piece of information that you can add to reports. Okay, so we talked about adding expression. If I want to add any of the built-in fields, the footer is a little picky. It seems to want you to create the text box first, and then you can drag it in. So if I insert a text box and then just drag in the execution time, okay? There were earlier versions that it worked better just dragging in like that, but you see I've got a no symbol. Doesn't want me to do that. Report name, it seems like, nope, same thing's happening there. So in the report header and footer, you may have to add the text box and then drag in the built-in field. Okay. So what kind of things might you want to change in a report? Well, remember the old paper. If you've been around as long as I have, you probably remember printing on that paper with the kind of greenish white stripes, you know, with the dot matrix printer. I've been around long enough that was the first printers that I used. I did cover this in an earlier week, but I'm going to go ahead and show it to you today just to make today's lesson complete. So if I select this row, my detail row, I can't really get to the properties here. Now, can I here? Group properties. Okay, so I can get to some of the properties here, but it doesn't look like I can get to the actual coloring. So let me try that again, right? Just click to select the entire row and then go over to the properties. And what I'm going to look at is background color. Right now there's no color. I'm going to click the drop down and choose expression. And I never remember this. Maybe if I had to do it more often, I would, but I have the formula right in front of me here on a paper, and I'll provide the formulas for you in the homework, so don't worry about that. But feel free to experiment clicking around down here, because it will help you get to know what kind of things you can do. So the first thing we're going to do is if it's IIF. I've had people tell me that I made an error before by having too many I's. Row number, nothing. I do not know why it's nothing, but that is just how it is. Mod, and mod returns the remainder. Okay, it's kind of like division, except instead of returning, I'm thinking dividend, probably the wrong word, forgot my math terms, but instead of returning the answer, it returns the remainder. So mod 2, so we'll get back a 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, comma, I'm going to make, and you can choose any colors you want. You could even come down here and choose a color. And that might be a good idea to do, because if you get the colors spelled incorrectly, it's not going to work. The other issue, silver, gray, G-R-A-Y, it shows up gray here. I have seen situations where the report is actually looking for G-R-E-Y. So be careful there if you use gray. I'm just going to use white. Okay. And then close the parentheses. and click OK. So now when I preview the report, it should show up with alternating lines. That might be useful if it's a really long report. Returning a lot of data, it might make it easier to read, especially if there's a lot of columns as well. So you will get requests from that from time to time. Another thing that you might need is, for example, the color of the font or the background color to change based on a value. I'm going to go ahead and change the color of the font in this case. So what I would like to do is make the color of the font red if the order quantity is less than 2. So if it comes up as a 1, I would like it to be red. Otherwise, the default black. So you can see we've got that formula here for the background color. What about the font? See, I'm going to go here. So if I can work in the text box properties, I really prefer that because it is a lot easier. So we're going to talk about the font. And notice that they, you know, if you want to do background color, that's fill. So there's font and fill. And there's the colors. You can even come up with a custom color that matches the color of your company's logo if you want. I'm going to go ahead and choose FX to get the expression box to come up. Get rid of the color black and have an equal sign. So in this case, if, and I can choose the fields here for this particular table. Now notice if I click on data sets, there are 2 different data sets. So if I go this route, notice that it's already aggregated, some are first. Okay, so be careful of that. In this case, I'm choosing the one that's attached to the table. So it knows that I'm probably going to want this one. I will choose order quantity, double click it, and it pops up at the top. So if the order quantity is less than 2, comma, notice I've got IntelliSense helping me out here, telling me what I want. If it's true, or I mean, if it's less than 2, I'm going to click back over on constants, and there's my colors again. Then I want it to be red. Okay. Comma. Otherwise, I want it to be black. Close parentheses. Okay. So, and also if I come down into common functions, I'll see program flow, you've got choose, if, and switch. Okay, so if is a good one if you've got a true or false. And click OK. And click OK. So now let's take a look at that and see how it shows up. Come on, report. There we go. So I'm going to increase the size of this a bit so you can see if the order quantity is 1, it's showing up as red. Okay, so you could easily do that. Something other, you could have a border show up, or you could have the background change, whatever you'd like to do. It's pretty easy to do. Okay, one of the most important types of interactivity with reports are parameters. I'm not going to show you how to do parameters. If you need to learn more about parameters, go back to week 3, because I spend almost an hour talking about it. But one thing that I really didn't cover was how to use an expression to control the default property. So this is something that you might get a request for once in a while. So if I go, I don't have a parameter yet, but I'm going to go in here, go to the data set properties, and this data is old data. So I don't want to have it like go with the current year or current date or anything like that. But what I can do is go by the current month. Okay, it's May right now. So what I'm going to do is say where I'm going to use the T-SQL function month against order date equals, and then I'm going to have a parameter called order month. Okay, where, and I also move that semicolon to the end so it wouldn't cause an error. Fingers crossed here. I'll click OK, and it worked. And I also have a new, I'm going to close up the built-in fields and open parameters. I get order month. I'm not going to go in and add available values. You could do that. You probably, for months, you probably just want to specify the values. But what I'm going to do is go to default values and specify a value and click add. And you can easily add a hard-coded value here. But what I'm going to do instead is click the FX button and get rid of that null that's sitting there. And under common functions, under date and time, there's a bunch of functions for manipulating date and time. And this is probably going to be some of the more common ones that you have to use with default parameters. Okay, so what I could do is just choose something that's equal to today. All right, but I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do is choose the month. And inside that, choose nest in the function today. Okay, so this is probably not the formula you're going to use in a real report, but it will work just to show you the types of things that you can do. You might do something like date diff to subtract a month, something like that. You know, whatever, when they're running the report, they're likely to want to see last month's data. So you could have a default parameter for last month, and if that's not what they wanted, they could change it, something like that. I'll click OK. And again, you see that expression right there, and click OK. And you've got the order month up here at the top. I'm going to click Preview. And notice that it automatically filled in as a 5. Okay. The thing to note is that you could have a list, a drop-down list of the months. And if you did that, this would still work. It would still hook into that. You know, you don't have to worry about it not working. It should still work if you did everything right. Okay, and you notice that we start here with May orders. If I go all the way to the end, I still have orders from May. So that worked. All right, so another thing that you could do as far as code that's outside of the expression is that you can add little VBA or Visual Basic functions. I have not done this a whole lot, but I'm going to show you how to do it. And I already have the function written just to avoid typos in a short class like this. So if I click on the little wrench up here to bring up report properties, and if you don't see it, you may have to click this to add the different buttons. And then go over to code. So here I have a public function. It has to be a public function, and then it's got a name, get color, and I have pass in a value. So it's not really tied to any particular data set. It's the report, for each row, is going to pass in a value. I did have some trouble with the data type. I went out and looked for help about the different data types that are used in reporting services, and what I came up with was that it used float. But when I tried to use float, I just would get errors. So I kept searching, and finally I saw another example where they used double. Switched it to double. and it worked. Okay, and so I'm going to pass in an amount, and it's going to return a string. I'm going to declare a variable. I'm going to check the amount. If it's greater than 5, then we're going to make it dark green. Otherwise, if it's more than or equal to 2, then it'll be gray. Otherwise, red. And then we're going to return the color. So you can't do anything real fancy or complex. But this might be useful if you have something you're going to use in lots of places in your report. You could create a report template that includes this functionality. I'm going to talk about that the very last week. I'll show you templates and have some custom code that you reuse across the board. However, the problem with that is if you did need to make a change, this custom code is embedded in every report. So if you had to go make a change, it's probably not that convenient. It is possible to have the functionality inside your T-SQL statement. You could create a property value based on the actual value that comes back. And you know, there's so many cool things you can do. I'm like, wow, that's not part of what I planned. I might try to do that. All right, so I'm going to click OK here. And what I have to do is go to the Textbox Properties. I'm going to go back to the font. And here I've got that expression. And so instead of using this IIF expression, I am going to use code get color. And I think you've got to just know what to use. I don't believe that there's any IntelliSense that's going to help with this. And then I'm going to go to the fields, order quantity, and close paren. So I've got my fingers crossed that this works. And click OK. I'm going to preview that. And you can kind of see the coloring is not great. Hopefully you can see it. The 6 is a darker color. The 3 is gray. It doesn't show up really, really well. So this is just an example of what you can do. You might want to do something a little bit different. Another thing that you can do is set up a variable inside your report. Again, these are inside the report. There's no global variable that you can use across reports. You could have a data set that you use, a shared data set that you use across reports that returns some of this information. That's really a good idea, actually. Probably better than doing what I'm going to show you. I'm going to click the little wrench again to bring up the properties and go to variables. And I've already created one, a variable called company name with the value of Redgate. And click OK. And I could add multiple variables there. Just click add again for another one. So I'm going to add a text box. I'm going to right click, go to expression, and under variables, this does actually show up. So there's a collection of variables. So in this case, company name. So when I run the report, Redgate should show up. And there's Redgate. Like I said, it's debatable how really functional this is, or really useful, I should say, that this is. So one of the other things that you can do is add additional fields to your report. A lot of times you might say, well, it's probably easier to do in the T-SQL. Sometimes you can modify the T-SQL, sometimes you can't. Maybe the query that comes back is actually a stored procedure that you can run, but you can't modify. Or maybe you don't have the T-SQL skills to do this. So what you can do is right-click, go to Dataset Properties, and click Fields. And you'll notice all the field names here. Okay. Theoretically, you could even rename them here. I probably wouldn't, just because it might cause some confusion down the road. I'm going to click Add, Calculated Field, and I'm going to call it Extended Price. And I'm going to click the FX button, put my cursor right after the equal, and go to Fields. I'm going to select Order, Quantity, times Unit Price, and click OK. So now I've got this expression, and click OK. So the cool thing is now list price shows up in my product list. So I can use it just like I would use any other field. Okay, I could group on it, not going to. I can add it in other formulas, you know, whatever I want to do. So all I have to do is click it and grab it. Only field from the current data set. Aha, I added it to the wrong place. I mean, I'm looking at the wrong thing. Extended price is what I really intended to be looking at. Okay, so there's extended price. Just grab the wrong thing. There we go. And there actually is a way to add other fields. It's a little tricky. I'm not necessarily prepared to show it, so maybe I will show it next week. Okay, so let me run the report. And the order month 5 is still there. Takes a couple seconds because this is a pretty long report. And there it is. Okay, so there's that extended price. I'm going to add another calculated field that I'm going to use in a few minutes on another example. I'll click Add, Calculated Field. I'm going to call it Order Year. Click the FX button and Common Functions, Date and Time, Year, and then go to Fields, Order Date, close paren, and click OK. I'm going to be using that in a later example. So the next thing to do is talk about interactive sorting. I've shown you in the grouping week that you can go to any of the groups. Right now I just have the details. Go to any group and go to sorting and add the sorting. So I could do something like that to add sorting. Okay. There's something else you can do. What if you are asked to have some interactive sorting? Your end user just wants to be able to click on a header and have the sorting change, or click on multiple headers. You know, first sort on order date and then sort on product ID, something like that. So you can do it. So what you have to do is click on each of the headings that you want to sort on, right click, go to Textbox Properties, and interactive sorting. Now, I believe that this particular property can only be found in the Textbox property dialog, not over here in the other properties window. I'm going to enable interactive sorting. I can choose to sort details or groups. I've actually only sorted on details. I'm just wondering how complex, things can go kind of crazy if you do too much. And sort by, and it's going to be the same field that I'm working on, sales order ID, and click OK. So I'm going to continue to do that on whichever ones I'm interested in. I'm going to do one more and then stop, but you could do all of them. And click OK. I'm going to preview the report. I do have that hard-coded sorting in there. So I don't remember if I've ever tried to have both in the same report. We'll see if it works. If not, I can take out the hard-coded sorting. Okay, so now you can see these little arrows for each one. And let's say I want to sort by order. Well, let's do it by product ID. And it looks like it's not responding. Probably because it's a long report. It's busy. That's nice. What I think I'm going to do, just to make things, if I can get it to respond, I think I'm going to do is just change this to return just the top 1,000 rows so that the report runs quicker. And that way, even though I said don't do that, don't report it again. Let's do top 1,000 and click OK. And run it again. See if it behaves better this time. Okay, came up pretty quick. I'm going to click on product ID. There we go. I could click on, let's say, descending sales order ID. And I'm going to hold the Shift key down and click on descending product ID. Okay, so you can see how that works. If you hold the Shift key down, you can choose multiple. There's also another way to include a drop-down box at the top to include a sort. I thought it would be really, really easy to do, but it turns out that there are lots and lots of steps required to make it work. I don't really think it's worth it. I'll see if I can find that, and I'll include it in the references or the resources for this week, if I can find it. I started to go down the path one time, and I just didn't think it was worth it. It was too many steps. Okay, so we did the sorting. I'm going to go back and back to my product sales here. Here we go. And I'm going to add another grouping level. Add group, parent group. If you don't know how to add groups, go back to last week where I spent the whole session talking about how to add groups. So what I want to do here is group on order year, that calculated field that I created a few minutes ago. I'm going to add a group header and click OK. So if I preview this, I'm only going to get 1 year since I'm restricting it to top 1,000, but that's okay. So pretend that there's actually more years showing up. All right, so what if I would like to have those collapsing sections? Okay, how do we do that? So what you do is go to the details row, the thing you want to collapse, and go to group properties, go to visibility, and choose hide. Then click display can be toggled by this report item, which is the order year. So when I click order year, it's going to toggle it. Okay, make sure you start with hide, otherwise it won't make sense. There are some other programmatic things you can do. There's a lady, Melissa, data chick, can't think of her last name, who has a really cool article about how to create, like say you've got hundreds of sections. If you want to open them all up at once or close them all up at once, she has an article about how to do that. I'll also include that in my resources because I think it's a pretty cool thing to do. I'm going to click OK, preview the report. And oh, we do have 2 years, so that's good. If I expand 2001, report actually has to go out and refresh. That's the bad thing. 2001 is open, and if I go down far enough, 2012 is still closed up. So I have never really had too many requests for this type of feature. Typically, they'll just want a summary and a click-through, or something like Melissa's report did, where you can have one thing to check to have everything open up or everything close up. So the next thing to look at is how to have a click-through report. So what I'm going to do, and I have used my product sales base report. I intended to make a copy of it, and I didn't do that, but that's okay. So I'm going to do that now. I copied it, right-click on the project, and then paste. And then right-click and rename. And I'm going to just call this product sales without the word base in it. So what I'm going to do is change this report so that it requires a parameter, a product ID. So it's going to be filtered by product. I'm going to right-click, go to Dataset Properties, and I'm going to add in the where clause. Let's see, I'm going to get rid of the semicolon. And SOD product ID equals at product ID. And click OK. The other thing I'm going to do is go in here and turn off that visibility feature. Turn that off just because it'll get in our way. Okay, so now there's a product ID variable needed. I've got a product list report. It's just a list of the products, the ID name, color, size, and list price. What I'd like to do is click on the product ID and drill through to another report that has all the sales, okay? If I go to Textbox Properties and go to Action, you can do some things. You can go to Bookmark, which is a section that's been marked in the report. I probably have done that maybe once just to try it. Go to another report, go to a URL, another website, or report in another reporting services. I'm going to click or leave it the default, go to report, and specify a report to go to. So in this case, it's already there. I'm going to click OK. So I already have that in place, and I want to go through the steps, go through all the steps to show you. So I'm going to right-click, go to Textbox Properties, go to Action. So by default, it's going to be set to none, not to go to Report. Click Go to Report, specify a report. It's got to be in this project. And I'm going to choose Product Sales. Now I have to map this. I have to map the product ID that was clicked on to the parameter in that other report. And to do this, I have to click Add. So if there are a number of parameters to pass along, you will have to click Add once for each one. Another thing is if you set these up, click OK, and then go back and edit it, it will no longer show you these in the dropdown. You'll have to come up with them yourself. One way around that would be just to click None, click OK, go in and start fresh. So that other report has two parameters. It's got the default order month. I'm not going to worry about sending that one over. But you do have to make sure that that parameter in that other report has a way for that value to be filled in. In this case, it's a default. So product ID and then value. And in this case, I'm getting a list of all the fields that are on the report. So I want to send over product ID. I could have something more complex, some kind of an expression as well. But most of the time, this is what you'll do. And click OK. When I click Preview, I'm going to get rid of this here. When I click Preview, notice that when I hover over, oh, can't see it. When I hover over Product ID, my cursor changes to a hand. Now, what you can do is, for example, change the font so it looks like a hyperlink, make it like blue or something and underscored. You could do that as well. So when I go to other things, it's no longer that hand. Okay, so I'm going to click that. And when I do, it turned into product ID sales. There are actually no sales for that particular report. I can click back to parent right here. And I'm going to scroll down. I think some of these, that's a frame. Let's try a bicycle. Hopefully that's got some sales. There we go. So there's a particular product, 717, that did have some sales. And you can see that it worked. There's another way to do this. Once in a while, you will have a report, especially if the data is coming from more than one place. How do you include that in one table? How do you do that? So what I'm going to do is I'll just make a copy of product list. Right click and paste. And I'm just going to name this one product list 1 or something. So it's got to have a different name. Double click, and I'm going to go in and remove that action from product ID. Set it to none and click OK. So if let's say I have a data source from an Oracle system that has part of the information and one data source pointing to SQL Server, or maybe 2 separate SQL servers. For some reason, I have data coming from different places. So what I can do is I'm going to take this and make a copy of it. I'm going to rename it. I'm going to call it Subquery. I'm sorry, Subreport, not Subquery. And double click it. So I'm going to get rid of, let's see, I'm going to get rid of a lot of things. I'm going to remove the page header. I'm going to remove the page footer. And I'm going to get rid of things that are not really needed. Let's get rid of the order year group. So we got sales order ID, order date, product ID. We don't really need product ID or name because those things are in the parent report. I'm going to get rid of that. Get rid of that. And then I'm going to tighten the report up. So basically what I'm doing is, instead of treating this as a report per se, that's standalone report, this particular report is going to be part of another one. Okay, it's just going to be a piece inside a table. I think I'll also get rid of the order month piece. And just leave that product ID parameter there. That's how we're going to link to the parent report. And get rid of the order month parameter. And tighten this up as close as I can. All right, so it's going to be really compact. I'm going to make sure that it runs. And hopefully, there we go. So it still works. It's got that sorting in there. I don't really want that sorting. Textbox property, get rid of that. So this report is going to be not much to it, just enough to convey the information. All right, so I'm going to make sure that it's saved. I'm going to go back up to product list 1. I'm going to right click on the detail line and insert a row inside the group below. So now I have this extra row that's part of the detail. What I'm going to do is hold the shift key down, right click, and merge cells. Make that one cell. Then inside that cell, I'm going to right click and insert a subreport. Then I'm going to right click on the subreport and go to Subreport Properties. I need to find the subreport that I'm going to use. So we're going to use one named subreport. Probably wouldn't name it that. And click OK. And then I'm going to preview it. The thing is, there's quite a few. So I'm getting this error. One or more parameters. Oh, we're not specified. That is an error that makes sense. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the properties. Forgot to go to the parameters section. How do I connect the two? There was another error that I was getting previously. If it comes up, I'll show you how to take care of it. If not, I'm going to save it. So since I didn't take care of the parameters right away, the list of parameters that it's needing is not showing up. So I'm just going to have to type it in. And for the value, product ID, and click OK. So if you ever close it up, either navigating to another report or a sub-report, you don't take care of those parameters right away, they don't show up. You have to type them in. And let's see how this works. This is probably not the most efficient thing in the world because that sub-report is going to have to run once for every product ID. So it, you know, I have done this on occasion, but it's probably going to be something where there's not a lot of data. It's really taking a long time, so I'm going to stop it. Go back to the sub-report, product sales. It does see top 1,000. Let's just make it top 10. And maybe on the product list, just for demonstration purposes, because it's taken a long time. Let's just make this one top 30. I was able to do it okay when I was getting ready for the class, but it's just really taken a long time. So there you go. You can see that there were no sales for some of these. Now, probably what could be done is that we could make the whole line invisible if there's no rows coming back. Might be able to do that. And here's a place where we did get some sales. So that's it for this week. Next week, we're going to talk about the many visual components of reporting services. I am actually not going to have class on Memorial Day. It's a holiday in the US, and I think it's also a holiday in the UK as well. And I will be back again in 2 weeks. So take care and have a great holiday.